The fate of Sauron after the destruction of the One Ring. The silence that fell over Mordor was almost deafening. The sky, once filled with dark clouds and a reddish glow that never faded, began to lose its sinister color. The flames of Mount Doom, which had burned incessantly for centuries, roaring like the very heart of darkness itself, began to falter. And then, in an explosion of fury and despair, the volcano spewed fire and ash over the devastated land. At the top of Barad-dûr, the dark tower, the foundations trembled. The great walls, built with the magic of their master, began to crack. The flaming eye, which for centuries had spied upon everything and everyone, widened in horror, for it knew. It felt it. The One Ring had been destroyed. Sauron, the Dark Lord, was stripped of his greatest power. The moment of the fall when Frodo, in a final impulse of weakness and possession, claimed the ring for himself. All could have been lost. But then, Gollum, the creature deformed by the very corruption of the ring, attacked. He tore the ring from Frodo's finger in a desperate frenzy, only to fall into the blazing fire of Mount Doom. The instant the One Ring touched the flames, Sauron screamed. Not a common scream. Not a sound that could be heard with ears. It was a scream of the soul, a wail that shook the winds and echoed to the farthest reaches of Middle-earth. The shadow of his presence, which stretched like an eternal night, withdrew. His army sourced trolls, corrupted men. Terrible creatures felt the rupture of his dominion and panicked. Many fled. Others simply fell, as if the life force that kept them standing had been ripped away. The eye, which burned atop the dark tower, shuddered. And then, with one final flash of fire and despair, it disintegrated. Barad-dûr collapsed. The stones of the fortress, which had endured for ages, crumbled like sand in the wind. And with its fall, Sauron's shadow was carried away by the gale sweeping across the ravaged lands of Mordor. But that did not mean he was completely destroyed. The spirit of Sauron was a Maya, a primordial entity forged in the dawn of time. He was not a mere mortal who could be slain by steel and fire. He was a force, a spirit of great power, corrupted by Morgoth, his former master. And now, he was reduced to his weakest form. No physical body, no army, no kingdom. He became nothing but a wandering shadow, formless, powerless to influence Middle-earth as before, yet still conscious, still alive. However, unlike in the past when his essence could regroup and return, this time he was stripped of everything that had sustained him. Without the ring, he could no longer manifest physically. Without Barad-dûr, he had no throne to rule from. Without loyal followers, he had no one to spread his influence. And then, for the first time in countless ages, fear consumed him. A fate worse than death. As time passed, his presence began to fade. His existence became nothing but a whisper, an echo dot. He could no longer influence the minds of mortals. He could not corrupt kings, nor raise armies. His strength was diluted, scattered by the wind, dissolved into the very fabric of the world. And then, the inevitable fate arrived. Trapped in an undefined state of existence, unable to interact with the world, Sauron was cast into the shadows, an eternal exile. Perhaps in the darkest corners of Middle-earth, echoes of his presence still remained. Perhaps in forgotten ruins, some would feel a sudden chill, an inaudible whisper in the wind. But that was all, a remnant of something that was once one of the greatest terrors the world had known. Never again would he raise an army. Never again would his shadow cover the sun. Never again would the free peoples tremble at the sound of his name. He became nothing, a vestige, a spirit trapped in eternity, unable to return, yet unable to fully disappear. And so, the legend of Sauron became just that. And legends fade. His name, once spoken in whispers of dread, would become little more than an echo in the histories of Middle-earth. Future generations would read of his rise and fall as they would of dragons and wars long past. But no one would fear him anymore. Sauron had not only been defeated, he had been forgotten. That was his true doom. Not to die, but to vanish. To linger in the dark, unseen and unheard. To be nothing more than a memory that, in time, would cease to matter. An eternity without return. Once, he had been the second in command to Morgoth, the mightiest of the Ainur who had ever fallen to darkness. He had been a god of terror, a master of deceit, a forger of dominion. Now, he was nothing. He had long sought to avoid the fate of his master, who had been cast beyond the world into the timeless void. Sauron had always believed he was different, that he could escape that doom, that he would rule Middle-earth forever. But his arrogance had been his downfall. Now he suffered a fate worse than that of Morgoth. For at least Morgoth had been cast into a prison where he still existed in some form, where perhaps one day he could return. Sauron had no such hope. He had lost his power permanently. There was no way back. He had become a formless presence, doomed to wander unseen and unheard for all eternity. There would be no resurrection, no new stronghold, no great war to wage. He would never again raise an army. However, the fate of the One Ring ultimately fell into the hands of a small company of heroes who formed the Fellowship of the Ring. The ring was carried by Frodo Baggins, who, with the help of his companions, managed to reach Mount Doom to destroy the artifact. The destruction of the One Ring, the end of Sauron, when the One Ring was finally destroyed in the fires of Mount Doom thanks to Gollum's intervention. As he fought Frodo for control of the ring, Sauron's fate was sealed. The destruction of the ring not only severed Sauron's connection to the material world, but also eradicated the core of his power, something into which he had poured so much of himself. With the ring's destruction, Barad-dûr was reduced to ruins. His forces were scattered, and his ability to manifest physically was obliterated. Now, without the ring and any tangible connection to the material world, Sauron was reduced to a state of powerlessness. Although he still existed in a spiritual form, he no longer had the strength or capacity to influence the world as he once did. This moment marked the end of Sauron as a threat to Middle-earth. Without the ring, he could no longer rebuild himself or regain his physical form. His essence would persist, but only as a shadow of his former self, without any power or influence. In essence, he was destroyed in the way that mattered most: this ability to dominate and control Middle-earth. Imagine, if you can, a time before time, when the world was nothing more than a thought in the minds of immortal beings. Before the realms of the elves, before the thrones of men, even before the stars were kindled in the vast firmament. It was in this primordial time that the Ainur were conceived, the great spirits who emerged from the thought of Eru Ilúvatar, the creator of all things. They were not mere gods in the classical sense, they were manifestations of divine will itself, each carrying a unique aspect of existence, like music made flesh, like ideas molded into immortal forms. And then came the music of the Ainur, the great music, the song of creation in the vast void of the beginning. Ilúvatar gathered the Ainur and set them a challenge to sing together a symphony that would shape existence. Each Ainu had their own melody, a unique gift bestowed upon them by their creator. At first, harmony flowed like a river of light, shaping the concepts of time, space, and matter. But not all Ainur were content with this. Melkor, the mightiest of the Ainur, conceived a desire within himself, a desire to create something that was his alone. His song became discordant, dark, introducing a melody that challenged the symphony of his brethren. He launched his own music, trying to dominate that of Ilúvatar. What followed was a battle of music. Twice, Ilúvatar raised new melodies, deeper, more sublime, overpowering Melkor's dissonance. But the rebellious Ainu persisted, defying the very order of the cosmos. Until at last, Ilúvatar rose and with a final chord silenced all music. And then, he showed the Ainur what they had created. Through the music, a world had been born, Arda, the realm where living beings would dwell, a reflection of the notes that had been played. And to the surprise of many, Ilúvatar revealed something even Melkor had not foreseen. The children of Ilúvatar, the elves and men, were not part of the music, but of the direct will of the Creator. And so, with destiny set, some of the Ainur chose to descend into this newborn world. These would be called the Valar, the great powers of Arda. The Valar, the lords of Arda. Thus, the Valar entered Arda, shaping its seas, mountains, and skies. Each had dominion over an aspect of existence. Let us meet them, Wanton, Manwe, Lord of the Winds, and King of the Valar, atop the sacred mountains of Tanaketel, where the winds dance among the clouds, dwells Manwe Sulimo, the greatest of the Valar after Melkor, and the one chosen by Ilúvatar to rule over Arda. His domain is the air, the storms, and the flight of the great eagles. He sees all that happens in the world through the wings of his birds, but there is something serene about Manwe. He does not fully comprehend evil, for his heart is pure, and his mind is always set upon the harmony of the world. And beside him shines his queen, too, Varda, the Lady of the Stars. Ah, Varda Elentari, whose name is revered even by the wisest of elves. She's the one who kindled the stars in the heavens, whose gaze is feared even by Melkor himself. It was she who illuminated the celestial spheres when Arda was still shrouded in darkness. Her name, uttered by the elves as Elbereth Gilthaniel, is a call to hope. Together, Manwe and Varda rule the skies, the most exalted among the Valar. But below them, other powers shape the land and waters. 3. Ulmo, the Lord of the Seas, in the depths of the oceans, where light barely reaches, resides Ulmo, the most solitary of the Valar. Unlike the others, he rarely sits in councils and prefers to wander through the waters of the world, guiding the tides and whispering secrets through the waves. Ulmo needs no palaces, the seas are his dwelling, and his voice echoes in rivers and rains. He is one of the few Valar who never abandoned the children of Ilúvatar, often sending mysterious messages to elves and men. And while Ulmo rules the waters, another Valar shapes the earth. 4. Alle, the world's smith, where mountains rise, where metals lie deep within the earth, there is the work of Alle, the great smith of the Valar. He shaped the lands and taught elves and dwarves how to work with stone and metal, but his impatience nearly led to his downfall. Before the elves even awoke, Alle, eager to create, fashioned the dwarves sturdy, stubborn, and resilient beings. But Ilúvatar had not ordained this creation. What happened then? The Creator, in his infinite wisdom, did not destroy the dwarves. Instead, he granted them life and allowed them to awaken after the elves so as not to disrupt the order of the world. And while Alle shaped the stone, his wife tended to the life that flourished within it. 5. Yavanna, the Lady of Nature, the trees, the flowers, the fruits of the earth, all these spring from the hands of Yavanna Kamantari, the Queen of the Earth. She is the mother of all green things, the creator of the 2 trees of Valinor, which illuminated the days before the sun and moon. It was Yavanna who pleaded with Ilúvatar to protect her creations from the axes of dwarves and men. In response, the Creator conceived the Ents, the shepherds of the trees, who would roam the world to guard them. The Valar against Melkor, the battle for harmony, but not all was peace. For Melkor, the mightiest of the Ainur, became Morgoth, the Dark Lord. He corrupted lands, destroyed lights, and raised armies of orcs and dragons. And so began the war between the Valar and Morgoth, a struggle for the fate of Arda, a conflict that would shape the entire history of the world. And the story? It is long indeed. But that is a tale for another day. The greatness of the Valar and the fate of Arda. The Valar were not merely rulers of the world, they were the very foundations upon which Arda was shaped. They were reflections of Ilúvatar's will, fragments of the divine that descended into the physical realm to guide, protect, and shape it according to the grand vision they had sung in the great music. But even among them, there were flaws, doubts, and internal conflicts, for, though they were immortal and powerful, they were not omniscient. And thus, within the greatness of their deeds, There were also tragedies and mistakes that would shape the fate of Middle-earth. The power of the Valar architects of the world. The Valar were not distant forces ruling from afar. They were the very elements of Arda itself, Manwë, the sky and the wind, the all-seeing gaze. Varda, the light of the stars, the refuge against darkness. Ulmo, the deep seas, whispering mysteries and shaping destinies. Aule, the forger of mountains and metals, the master of craftsmanship. Yavanna, the mother of all living things, the hand that made forests and fields bloom. Mandos, the guardian of the dead and the keeper of fate. Nienna, the lady of tears whose sorrow taught compassion and wisdom. Each of them was an essential piece in the grand design of the world. Their actions and their choices shaped not only the present of Arda but its entire future.